A critical aspect in a police officer job is personal discretion. Discretion also exists for courts. Judges have discretion in prosecutors. Law enforcement, they get to decide who to arrest, put in jail, and in some extreme cases, use deadly force on. So what is discretion? Well, it is a personal decision in making a choice. What law enforcement is not regulated, law enforcement is not regulated in their daily procedure by any sort of administrative scrutiny or subject to any judicial or court review. So they have a wide range of discretion. And juveniles enjoy nearly identical procedural protections as adults do. And while police have broad discretion generally, they have even more discretion or broader discretion when dealing with juveniles. A juvenile's first contact with the juvenile justice system is with law enforcement. It is at this point that police have to make a decision that involves them using their discretion. And there are a number of factors that influence an officer's discretion. Let's talk about those. What are those? If all officers acted in a fair and just manner, the three factors that equally affected their decisions in taking formal action, and formal action refers to arrest and then a referral to the court. Those factors were the seriousness of the crime. Are we talking about a petty theft or an assault? The other thing is the situation in which it occurred. Was it a domestic incident? Did it involve multiple victims or people? What was the situation? And what's the legal record of the juvenile? Have they had police contact before? Had they been referred to court before? Additionally, formal action would be taken if the crime is serious and has been reported by a victim who is a respected member of the community, and if the offender is well known to the police officer, meaning this isn't their first time in trouble. However, there are a number of other factors that have played a role in police discretion. There's environmental factors, an officer's living and working environment. What does the community culture dictate? Is it more lax and progressive, or conservative and no nonsense? Is there specific training in an area as a result of community organizations? So law enforcement takes more actions relative to those kinds of cases, such as, drug use, drug possession, gangs, that sort of thing. So the environment, what's the community norms? Departmental factors or police policy, how a department operates shapes the police practices. The department might mandate arrests with certain crimes and warnings in others. Areas where juveniles are more likely to hang out, they might focus on more arrests and warnings despite the crime involved. The police chief or mayor may be concerned with voter dissatisfaction, and they might want to crack down and enforce laws in a particular type of action, such as drug use, or as the one the book uses, underage drinking and driving. It could also be texting and driving, but something that's affecting the entire community, and the community is giving the, powers that be, those who they vote in, a hard time. Supervisors may want to crack down on loitering or disorderly conduct. So while other types of delinquent conduct slides, like a curfew violation, others not so much. When police implement or use a degree of fairness, or procedural justice as it's called, when making arrests, as well as in less formal situations, research has shown that they better gain offenders' cooperation, as well as deter them from further criminal activity. Additionally, when the youth who view police as legitimate, they're more willing to assist the police. The youths are more willing to assist. Procedural justice has significant validity. that researchers have compared the trade-off of short-term reductions in crime rate, where police use more aggressive tactics at the expense of fairness. For example, the broken windows policing. The broken windows theory of policing suggests that cleaning up the visible signs of disorder in communities like graffiti, loitering, panhandling, prostitution by aggressively arresting those who engage in those activities would then prevent more serious crime as well. Many of these disorderly acts are committed by juveniles. Aggressively engaging, though, in such arrests, while it may have a reduction in the crime rate minimally, the overall effect undermines the fairness of law enforcement in the eyes of the residents of the communities. More police departments are implementing policies and procedural fairness, but not much. There's a lot more that not as much, and there's much more that needs to be done, and there also needs to be more research done on its effectiveness. Another factor that determines police discretion, situational factors. Demeanor of the offender, how a person outwardly manifests their personality. Are they challenging authority? Are they talking back? More likely to be arrested. How crime or situation is encountered plays a role. If it is a police call and officers dispatch, more likely an arrest. Why? Because there's going to be a record of it. So if there's not an arrest, someone needs to know why. If officer happens upon a situation, though, or an altercation, the officer can just break it up and not make an arrest. Most studies show that the following factors play an important role in the police discretion process. I have the list right there on the screen. Attitudes of the complainant, the one making the complaint, and the offender. So is the complainant somebody who is an upstanding citizen in the community? The type of seriousness of the offense, the race, sex, and age of the offender's prior contacts with the police, the perceived willingness of the parents to assist in solving the problem, the setting or location in which the incident happened, whether the offender denies the action or insists on a court hearing, the likelihood that a child can be served by an agency in the community. So all of these things police take into factor, but as a factor in their discretion in making decisions. That's what they consider. There are extra legal factors that we're going to address. Does race, gender, or class, does that get taken into account when making an arrest? And I did mention it up top. That is one of the factors that is considered. Let's talk about bias, though. So that the police are more likely to arrest African Americans than similar whites. Racial bias can be shown by the present, can be shown in the system, can be shown to be present in the system, especially for African American youth. And think of this in the context of traffic stops. This was an example in the book, but it's extremely common. African Americans are more likely to be stopped, and that race is the main reason for the stop, the traffic stop. It's called racial profiling when that happens, and it's resulted in the phrase driving while black. There's a table in the book that represents African American juvenile arrests. It actually is my next slide, but I don't want to click it over just yet. From an FBI 2013 report that identifies the number of juvenile arrests in all of the serious crimes. We'll get to it in a moment. The research shows that not only they are more likely to be arrested, but to also be referred to formal processing, referred to the court system, where it has been shown that race has an effect on decision making there, where judges are using their discretion. But now I ask the question, is bias direct? Is the bias direct or is it indirect? There's no doubt that direct discrimination by the juvenile justice system is wrong. The issue of indirect discrimination, however, is sometimes more, controversial. Consider the following. The police often concentrate their patrols in low-income communities, claiming that such communities have higher crime rates and that it makes sense to put the most police where there's most crime. This policy means that the lower class individuals come under greater police scrutiny than middle class individuals. The police may therefore be more likely to detect a criminal act by a lower class person than by a middle class person. It also means that African Americans come under more police scrutiny than whites, since African Americans are more likely to live in lower class communities, although most African Americans do not live in such communities. Is there anything that could be done to reduce this consequence? How about this? We could talk about this, but I have a couple stories here that I think capture more personal experiences that some have had with the individual police. There was an editorial in the New York Times, 2007. I know it's a little dated, but it's still relevant, I think, where the New York Times editorial described an experience. It said, no one is paying much attention, but parts of New York City are like a police state for young men, women, and children who happen to be Black or Hispanic. They are routinely stopped, searched, harassed, intimidated, humiliated, and in many cases arrested for no good reason. Last Monday, in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn, about 36 grieving young people on their way to a wake for a teenage friend who had been murdered were surrounded by police, cursed at, handcuffed, and ordered into paddy wagons. They were taken to the 83rd Precinct Station House, where several were thrown into jail. The editorial writer goes on to state that the police said these young people were on a rampage, yelling and blocking traffic. But in his research, the writer's research, but that every account that he was able to find described a large group of youngsters very sad and downcast about the loss of their friend, walking peacefully toward the station. That's one story. Recently, a criminologist interviewed 40 African American adolescent men in a disadvantaged urban community to learn more about their interactions with the police. The author of the study found that 83% of those who responded reported having experienced harassment themselves, and more than 9 out of 10 reported that someone they knew had been harassed or mistreated. These respondents consistently identified frequent pedestrian and vehicle stops as the bedrock of neighborhood policing efforts. It was not simply that young men objected to being routinely stopped, but they took particular exception to the way officers spoke to them during the encounters. Several study participants expressed grave concern about being ordered to sit or lie on the pavement while enduring physical intrusive searches. Approximately 2/3 of the young men said the police are almost never polite, and slightly under half reported that the police often harass and mistreat people in the neighborhood. These quotes are not meant to imply that all police harass African Americans or that all African Americans have negative views of the police. Nevertheless, young African Americans in disadvantaged communities are more likely than others to report negative experiences with the police, experiences stemming from the aggressive police tactics that are more often used in such communities. And these negative experiences have a range of unfortunate consequences. And as indicated earlier, negative treatment by the police may increase the likelihood of crime. So something to keep in mind. What about gender? Gender bias. We discussed this in the Gender and Delinquency chapter. Is there a difference between police treatment of male and female offenders? Well, there are mixed results regarding the research done in this area. Data on gender suggests that males may be somewhat more likely to be arrested and treated severely for delinquent offenses than similar females who engage in such crimes. Among other things, it is argued that males are more likely to be seen as a threat than females. Some data, however, suggests that this attitude may be changing. Female delinquents have been treated more like male delinquents in recent years. This new equality of treatment is especially true for females who do not conform to gender stereotypes, i.e., they do not act submissive when confronted by the police. This change may partly account for the fact that female arrests for violence are increasingly faster than male arrests. However, in some jurisdictions, females are more likely to be arrested and treated severely for many status offenses than similar males. This is especially true for offenses like running away from home and being a nonconformist, being incordial. That's what I was going with. It is argued that the police and court officials often associate these status offenses with sexual behavior or the possibility of sexual behavior, and on the part of the females, and that they feel that it is necessary to more closely regulate the sexual behavior and quote-unquote moral life of females than males. So yeah, there is some gender bias as well within police discretion. How about their organization themselves? Oh, here's the arrest status charts of the African American juvenile arrests reported by the FBI in 2013. 54 juvenile African Americans, men, for murder. Forcible robbery was 71 arrests. So it's quite significant. Do police allow bias to affect their decisions? As we continue on, let's talk about their organizational bias. Highly bureaucratic and unprofessional departments are more likely to be insulated from the communities they have to serve. Stereotypes, I kind of brought this up in the racial bias example or discussion. Stereotypes of lower class neighborhoods often result in biased police discretion and actions when crimes occur in those areas. Police patrol there more because the community members need to be kept under control, as they would say, under these departments. And the research shows that police are more likely to hassle or arrest African American males in poor neighborhoods. I already kind of alluded to that in the last discussion. But under their own organization has created potentially other indirect bias, their own bias in the organization. So overall, therefore, teens found in these residents, they have a greater chance of arrest and acquiring a record than youths in other areas. While police may not discriminate on an individual level because policies focus on specific areas, this may result in class or racial bias when the police are processing juveniles. So that concludes the discussion on police discretion. The last topic of this chapter is going to be police work and delinquency prevention.